All right, this is the second page of the study guide. In question 7, it says, which value of x will make A, so line A, parallel to line B? Show all work. So really, we need to think about the converse of the alternate interior angles theorem. So if we look at these are alternate interior angles. The alternate interior angles theorem tells us that if lines A and B are parallel, then our alternate interior angles are congruent. The converse of that tells us that if these alternate interior angles are congruent, then those two lines must be parallel. So all we need to do is make sure that these are the same. That will make A and B parallel. So I can say 5x minus 54 equals 3x plus 16. Then the rest of this is just algebra 1. If I look at both sides, I have 2 terms on the left, 2 terms on the right. I can't simplify or combine like terms. So I would probably subtract 3x from both sides. And when I rewrite this, I now have 2x minus 54 on the left side of my equal sign and 16 all by itself on the right. Then we want to get 2x by itself. So I would add 54 to both sides. You're welcome to use a calculator. Let's see. 54 plus 6 is 60, plus 10 more is 70. So 2x is 70. And then divide both sides by 2. So x should equal 35. The quick way to check our work is if we just plug that back in, 35 times 3, let's see, that's 90 plus 15, so 105. 105 plus 16 is, I think, 121. And then 5x minus 54, well, these are hard to check in our head. That's 5x is 5 times 35. So let's see, so 150 plus 25, 175. Subtract from that 54 and we get 121. So if you just plug those in and figure out if you did that correctly, you can always know if you answered that question correctly. All right, lines 8, 9, and 10, or problems 8, 9, and 10 are really similar. So question 8, are lines A and B parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Explain why using slopes. When you see the word explain, that means you've got to write something with words, not just show your work. So we need to know the slope of both lines. When I look at line A, it's in my slope-intercept form. So if I look at line A, I know my slope is 3/4. For line B, however, it's not in slope-intercept form, so we must manipulate it. I can subtract 1 first from both sides. When I do that, I now have 8y equals 6x plus 2. And you guys did this in Algebra 1. Problems like this anyway. Then I could divide everything by 8. So if I divide the left side of the equation by 8, I have to divide everything on the right side of the equation by 8, the 6 and the 2. It doesn't matter what our y-intercept is, we really need to just know our slope. So I get y equals 6x divided by 8. All I could really do is simplify that. So I could factor out a greatest common factor of 2. I get a 3x on the top and then a 4 on the bottom. So that's 3/4 x. And then 2 divided by 8 is just 2/8 or 1/4. But I'm not really concerned with my y-intercept. What I need is that number in front of the x, my slope. So it turns out that my slope is the same. I get 3/4. So I can answer the question and say lines A and B are parallel, but I have not explained yet what I did. So to explain why, I could say lines A and B are parallel because their slopes are the same. All right, so this, even though it's just one sentence, this is an explanation. This is showing your work. And if the problem says you must do both, you must do both to get full credit. All right, let's look at number 9. Same question. Are they parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Explain why using slopes. Again, line A is already in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. I don't care that my y-intercept is -9, but I do care that my slope is 2/3. All right, line B, we've got to manipulate this to get y by itself. So if I see 10y is on the left, I'm going to start by subtracting 7 from both sides. Now 10y is by itself on the left. I have 15x on the right. -1 minus 7, that's the same as -1 plus -7. It's getting more negative. That's going to be -8. You can always use a calculator if you're not sure. Next, I'm going to divide everything by 10. So when I do that, 15 divided by 10, again, all I can really do here is simplify this. They both share a factor of 5. So if I factor out a 5, that's like 5 times 3, that's like 5 times 2. If I factor out my 5s, I'm left with 3 halves. So y equals 3 halves x minus 8/10. And it doesn't really matter how what that simplifies to, because it's just our y-intercept, but it becomes 4/5. All right, so if I look at my slope is 3 halves. So I know they're not parallel because they're not the same, but they're also not perpendicular because they're both positive. So we're gonna say neither parallel nor perpendicular. And then we still have to explain why. So I'm going to say slopes are not the same and do not have opposite signs. All right, so when we say that the slopes are not the same, we're addressing why they're not parallel. When we say they don't have opposite signs, we're addressing why they're not perpendicular. So this is an explanation. And it's like 2 sentences. Really, we could make that 1 sentence. You can write 1 sentence. I know you can. All right, number 10. Explain. Ooh, explain. That means I gotta write a sentence. Explain whether the line through points A and B, we're given the ordered pairs, 3, 7, 6, 5. Explain whether that line is perpendicular to the line through points X and Y. So this time, we don't even have to decide if it's parallel or not. We're deciding if it's perpendicular or not. So this one's a little tougher, but what we want to do is first find the slope of the line that goes through points A and B. So the slope of, I'm going to write line AB, because I know if it goes through points A and B, I can name it line AB. And remember, finding the slope from points, we reviewed this in class, that if I call this like x1 and y1, x2 and y2, that we could find slope by finding our differences in y's, so y2 minus y1, over our differences in x's. That's the same as rise over run, but it doesn't make sense to call it that when we're not graphing. All right, so I'm just gonna carefully plug these in. So y2 is 5, y1 is 7, so I get 5 minus 7. x2 is 6, x1 is 3. Then if I simplify, 5 minus 7 is -2, 6 minus 3 is 3. And if just the numerator is negative and the denominator is positive, that means the entire slope is negative. So the slope of line AB is -2/3. We still have to find the slope of line XY. So the slope of XY, we can do it in exactly the same way. We're going to use x1, y1, x2, y2. All right, so let's see. So if I do 7 minus 1 on top, on bottom I have 13 minus 9. 7 minus 1 is 6. 13 minus 9 is 4. And what we said in class is if you don't simplify, you're not going to see what you need to see. So you can use a calculator if you want. If you don't have one, we said we've got to factor out the greatest common factor. So 6 and 4 both share a factor of 2. So I could rewrite 6 as 3 times 2. I could rewrite 4 as 2 times 2. When I factor out the 2, I'm left with positive 3 halves. So if one of my lines has a slope of negative 2/3, the other one has a slope of positive 3 halves, I know that they are perpendicular. So I could say the lines are perpendicular because their slopes have opposite signs and are reciprocals. Alternately, instead of saying that, you could tell me that their slopes have a product of -1. But you might need to actually check that to prove that. So negative 2/3 times positive 3 halves, I get -6 over positive 6, which is -1. All right, that's the end of page 2.